Learning Objective 2 talks about why companies begin to decentralize as they grow and how they use responsibility accounting for a performance measurement tool when they have decentralized. So what do we mean by the term decentralized period? Well, let's look at what happens to small companies before they generate or benefit from large growth. They tend to be centralized, which means that all of the management decision making tends to take place in one place. But as a company grows and they expand and take on different markets and different locations, it's kind of hard for a single person to maintain and manage all of the operations. So as companies begin to grow and begin to expand, they begin to what we call decentralize. And this simply means that their operations get split up into different segments or different divisions, different departments. And so we're beginning to delegate some of our responsibility to lower level management. And this is the process of decentralization. There are some benefits of the decentralization process. So as we mentioned, as a company grows, the manager doesn't have enough time to make all of these decisions at one organization, at one spot. So it does free top management up to do what they are best at, which is strategic planning and strategic management. And it allows them to delegate some of the lower level management skills that are simply a time-bearing task for them. So also, your book says it supports the use of expert knowledge. And I don't know if you guys ever watch Shark Tank on television, but one of the sharks was visiting with a company that he had invested in, and he told the young lady whose company he had invested in that her next process was to hire someone smarter than her, to hire someone who knew the business better than her. Sometimes this is intimidating for us, and so he wasn't insinuating that she wasn't good at what she did. He invested in her company. But it is nice to have, as your book mentions, managers that have a specialized knowledge of a product that we sell, or the market region that we're selling in, or the governmental regulations if there happen to be those tied to our product. So it gives us an opportunity to hire people who have specialized knowledge in certain areas. It also improves customer relations because the lower level management people are usually closer to the source, closer to the product, closer to the operations, and so they're closer to the customers. And so they do have, they tend to get better response time to their customers. For example, my husband is an engineer, and he used to work for Aquaglass, a company that was in Adamsville, and as they begin to their operations had been decentralized. So the different locations had their own customer service sites, and there was a lot of decentralized management that was going on within the individual facilities. But as they begin to downsize and begin to liquidate, they begin to take those management decisions back to the main headquarters or their centralized office. And as a result, they actually moved customer service to the main office. They moved it back to a centralized decision-making point. And so when customers called the corporate office for customer support, those people weren't as familiar with the product or the design or the warranties that were associated with them. And so it took much longer. Corporate ended up having to go back to customer service at those decentralized locations to get the information that they needed to carry back to their customers. And so it created a significant amount of lead time in being able to respond to those customers. Now, training is also a benefit because it allows you to begin to train people to fill those upper management slots at a later period in time. And so they're beginning to know the business, learn the business, and try to begin to understand what those strategic goals of the company actually are. And then also motivation and retention, because if we empower people within their divisions or their areas, they tend to have more motivation to do their job well, and retention seems to improve. Now, there are also some disadvantages that come along with decentralization, and one of those is duplicate cost. So if we have payroll at each different location, obviously we're going to have to pay for, multiple payroll clerks, maybe even multiple payroll softwares. And so we have to think about, even though we're decentralized, how can we avoid the duplication of cost as much as possible? And unfortunately, sometimes there are problems, as your book says, achieving goal congruence. And so segment managers sometimes tend to have just their segment goals and their profitability and their return on investment is what is of most concern to them, instead of realizing how their particular segment is contributing to the entire big picture as a whole. So we have to be careful with a couple of issues when we do decentralize. Now, when we are decentralized, we need some way. We are delegating responsibility to specific divisions and to specific units, and so we need some way to hold people accountable for the results of the management decisions that they are making. So we're giving them the authority. We want to be able to hold them accountable. And responsibility accounting is one of the ways that we can do this. So we set up responsibility centers in an organization. And the four most common types of responsibility centers are a cost center, revenue center, profit center, and an investment center. If we look at these each from an individual perspective, the cost center, just as it says, if you are a manager of a cost center, you are only responsible for controlling costs. You're not generating revenue. Your textbook says that the production department is a cost center. They don't have salespeople. They're not selling the product. They're just producing the product. And we're going to hold them accountable for manufacturing that product within the cost standards that we have given them. Now, revenue center, on the other hand, is someone who is responsible only for revenues. So if you are the sales rep for McGraw-Hill, then you're only responsible for generating the revenues of selling those books. You're not responsible for the cost of manufacturing or producing them. A profit center, on the other hand, the manager is responsible for both generating revenues and controlling their cost. And so once we kind of move up the management chain, and we become responsible for selling our product and maintaining its cost, we are a profit center. Then we can take that one step further. If we are responsible for revenues, cost, and turning around and investing those costs in additional capital, now we have become an investment center. And each one of these centers is held accountable for different types of performance measures. So, for example, our cost center is responsible for controlling cost. That's all. So we're comparing what they actually spent in the manufacturing process to what we budgeted. For example, Union University, the printing office, would be an example of a cost center. They're not selling printing services. They are simply printing, providing the service of printing for the university. And so we're going to compare what we budgeted for them with what they actually spent in the year. The revenue center, on the other hand, we're going to compare what the revenues that we thought they could generate versus what they did. So as your book uses a sunglass booth in the middle of the mall. It's a chain. They're not responsible for manufacturing the product. They're not responsible for the profit that they generate off of it. They just need to sell those sunglasses. Now, on the other hand, we've got the profit center that is doing both, okay, comparing actual revenues and cost to revenues and cost. So how efficient are you and how successful are you at generating profit? And then once again, the investment center is going to be responsible for more than just profit. How are you investing that profit in generating a return on your investment or a return on that income? So if we take a look at this breakdown of the organizational chart per se for Smart Tabs, if we start out with our president, our chief executive officer, and beneath him or her, we have the VP of Finance and the VP of Operations. So if you think about it, when we begin to break these things down, the VP of Finance is not responsible for selling anything. They're responsible for basically reporting and managing our investments. But if we come down the side over here where most of the processes are taking place. Let's just isolate ourselves over here for a moment. Your book tells you that most divisions are considered investment centers, because if the tablet division managers obviously wants to be able to manufacture and sell their tablets for a profit. And then what do we do with that profit? And so in most cases, a division manager would be considered an investment center. Sometimes in a less decentralized environment, these decisions get pushed further up. But just assume that you do have control over how you reinvest your profits, then you would be an investment center. Most of the time, the product divisions, so our standard tablet division and our premium tablet division, normally are simply profit and not investment centers. Okay, so how can we manufacture and sell the standard tablet for a profit, manufacture and sell the premium tablets for a profit? And so the person who's responsible for our tablet division as a whole may go one step above that and have the authority to reinvest those profits. Now, obviously, the production manager is only going to be responsible for the cost of production. The sales manager should only be held responsible for the sales or revenue that they can generate for our organization. Okay, so the larger we become, the more decentralized we may become, and we may have to identify these responsibility centers to have a way to hold our managers accountable. Okay, so take a break. We'll come back and look at Learning Objective 3, where we'll talk about some performance evaluation systems, and specifically one that's called the Balance Scorecard, how we can evaluate performance outside of just our financial statements.